Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber facing 2 years in prison. The Crown also filing an application to confiscate Barber's truck. Plus, federal candidates of the four main parties square off in last night's French language debate and gear up for tonight's English debate. And here in Lethbridge, our own 6 candidates hold a final debate.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. The leaders of Canada's four main political parties are expected to talk about affordability, tariffs, and threats to the country when they face off in Montreal tonight for a second and final debate, this time in English. During last night's French language debate, Liberal leader Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre aligned on support for new oil and gas pipelines as a matter of national security. Dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump was a running theme as the four main federal party leaders took the stage. Questions were also pitched on immigration, affordability, and Canadian identity. During an exchange on climate change, Poilievre argued Canada needs to build a national pipeline, highlighting how Alberta oil and gas is transported east through pipelines passing into the United States. But the leader of the Bloc Québécois disagreed.
Unfortunately, the other parties passed an unconstitutional law, C-69, which is a no more pipelines bill, and that's why Canadians and Quebecers now have to buy 139,000 barrels of U.S. oil every day. I will repeal C-69 to allow for the construction of hydroelectric projects, mines, and also pipelines so that we can get around Donald Trump and be sovereign when it comes to energy.
There's a competition as to who will be the biggest oil head here. The Americans buy our oil, we buy their oil, because that's how geography works. I want less oil, but let us be clear. The one that approved 9B for Enbridge was me when I was the Environment Minister, but I say that we have to progressively wean off of petrol and oil because the cost on families will be far worse than what Mr. Poilievre says. Paying for the consequences of climate change will cost billions of dollars every single year per family.
The co-leader of Canada's Green Party says a decision to disinvite the Greens from 2 federal debates in Montreal is, quote, dishonorable. Jonathan Piedneau says he was taken by surprise when he learned that the Leaders Debate Commission was not going to allow his party to participate after fielding candidates in less than 70% of ridings.
Well, we're not there because there was an arbitrary political decision that was made, and it deprives Canadians of an important voice. We looked at the possibility of trying to get an injunction, but as you know, to ask an injunction, this takes time, and we were deprived.
The leaders of the Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and Bloc Québécois will square off again tonight in English. Voters head to the polls on April 28th, with early voting taking place April 18th through the 21st. Here in Lethbridge, 6 candidates squared off in our region's third and final debate. The 2-hour event was held at the Lethbridge Public Library. Most questions from the public and media panel were directed at the Conservative and Liberal candidates. Some answers drawing groans from the crowd, and others applause. The incumbent, Rachel Thomas, hopes to hold on to her Conservative seat in Parliament for the 4th time, while former Mayor Chris Spearman tries to turn the Lethbridge riding Liberal red, rather. Nathan Svoboda is running for the NDPs, while Amber Murray represents the Green Party of Canada, and Clara Peterloo hopes to gain a seat for the People's Party of Canada. BCN has run feature stories on each individual candidate to find out more about their respective platforms, and you can find those interviews on our YouTube page and our website. And we have some exciting election-related news to tell you about. Our partner station, Merit TV Canada, is sending a semi-truck across Canada. This 18-wheeled billboard will be spreading awareness of the federal election and encouraging Canadians to vote. Along the way, the truck's crew will be talking to real Canadians on the road, hearing their stories and giving them a voice. To find out when the Merit TV Canada truck is rolling into your city, you can go to merittv.ca/election and track the truck on a map when it's in your area. We'd love for you to come out and snap a selfie and tag us on your social media. Meet our crew and tell us what issues matter to you in this election. Your voice matters now more than ever. Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber say they're both facing 2 years in prison after being convicted of mischief. They were found guilty on April 3rd. Barber was also found guilty of counseling others to disobey a court order. While Crown prosecutors haven't commented, Barber posted on Facebook that the Crown has also filed an application to confiscate and auction off his Big Red, which is his truck there, which led the convoy from Saskatchewan to Ottawa in January of 2022. Now, yesterday, Barber's defense lawyer Diane Magus filed an application for a stay of proceedings, saying Barber was given advice from police and lawyers during the protests in Ottawa that turned out to be incorrect. Lethbridge's chief of police, Shaheen Medizadeh, was subject to a disciplinary hearing on Thursday after an appeal from a former deputy chief was granted following his complaint against Medizadeh regarding allegations of misconduct. The incident traces back to an incident in 2021 where the chief allegedly broke COVID public health rules by taking a civilian member out for lunch. BCN's Landon Hickok has more details.
Here at City Hall, a public hearing was held on allegations of misconduct on Lethbridge Chief of Police Shaheen Medizadeh. Now, back in January of 2022, then Deputy Chief Scott Woods filed a complaint on Medizadeh regarding an incident where he took a chaplain who was serving with the LPS at the time out to lunch to thank him for his service during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. He took him out to lunch at a dine-in section of a local grocery store. According to the findings of fact, the chief took the chaplain out to lunch on a day in March of 2021. He viewed him as a cohort during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and saw it as permissible to dine out together. However, public health rules stated at the time that only a person and members within his household is permissible to dine out together. Medizadeh a few days later apologized, saying that he was not aware of the specifics of the public health rules at the time, despite masking and distancing whenever possible. He is facing allegations that he denied culpability and brought discredit to the Lethbridge Police Service. Chief Medizadeh was not available for comment throughout the day, and the hearing has been adjourned to June 16th at 9:30 a.m. for final decision.
Thank you, Landon. BCN's Landon Hickok reporting there. Alberta is pausing the procurement policy it announced more than a month ago to fight U.S. tariffs. Service Alberta Minister Dale Nelly says the province has decided to pause any further escalations in the spirit of diplomacy. Nelly pointed to the fact that since Alberta's retaliatory measures were first announced in early March, President Donald Trump's administration has put a hold on further tariffs. But Nelly says the province will continue with its ban on buying American liquor until a new North American free trade agreement can be renegotiated. Key tax filing deadlines are just around the corner. Experts say residents in Canada with a side hustle need to be aware of rules surrounding income declaration at this time of year. They say there's no minimum threshold of income and that has to be made on side gigs in order to file taxes on it. All pay must be declared, and those that omit earnings on their filings could face penalties. April 30th is the deadline for most people to file their tax return. Toronto police have now identified a suspect in a hit and run that injured 4 people on Toronto Metropolitan University's downtown campus. Inspector Errol Watson said at a news conference that the suspect is considered dangerous and police believe he used his vehicle for a targeted attack against a specific person on a pedestrian walkway. The incident happened around 2 p.m. Wednesday. Thankfully, 2 of the people hit only sustained minor injuries, while the other 2 were taken to hospital with serious injuries.
We believe the vehicle was intentionally targeting a specific individual on the walkway. The suspect we are now seeking is Ryan Petrov, 23, of Toronto. We believe this individual is dangerous, and we are urging the public not to approach him. If you see him, call police immediately. I can also confirm that the vehicle involved in this incident was a green four-door Honda with stolen license plates. To protect the identity of the victim, we are not commenting on the nature of the relationship between the suspect and the targeted individual, nor can we speak to the motivations at this stage.
The worst mass shooting in modern Canadian history began almost 5 years ago. The April 2020 attack that killed more than 20 people came shortly after a Nova Scotia man brutally assaulted his common-law wife. Since that day, there has been a spike in the number of intimate partner violence homicides recorded by authorities in that province. 7 women in Nova Scotia have been murdered by their intimate partners over the past 6 months alone. The Lethbridge Cardiac Centre of Excellence continues receiving community support. In a statement, Alberta Health Services says 3 Lethbridge businesses have donated a total of $350,000. The centre will feature catheterization, electrophysiology, and echocardiography labs, as well as cardiac MRI and CT scanners, among other services. With these funds, support for the project is 1/3 complete, with 22 months left on the timeline. AHS also says donors are Gas King, KCL Cattle Co., and Lethbridge Toyota, whose CEO Tim Shipper has a personal connection to the project.
My Uncle Peter was somebody who helped build businesses with my dad in the 1980s and 1990s. He had some heart issues as he got older in life, and he dealt with some things in Calgary for the most part. He had to go back and forth quite often to go to Calgary. He would have benefited greatly from more substantial infrastructure for heart care in southern Alberta. I mean, Andrea and I both have people that would have been greatly assisted with local help. We realize how important it is for this kind of thing that exists in southern Alberta, so that's why we decided to donate the money, and we're happy to do so. And we encourage as many local businesses who can afford it to do the same, to make an impact and commit to something locally that can help, help people in the local community. It's just going to provide so many people with better access to healthcare in southern Alberta.
The goal is for this new cardiac center to be operational by 2027-28. Many people don't like dealing with numbers, but every day we must make smart decisions about how to save, research, and manage our money properly. In that sense, it's important to know that we must educate ourselves financially, as our BCN's Heidi Echeverria reports in this next story.
Understanding finance and how it positively or negatively influences our economy is something that we should all know. Such is the case of Jody Ann Smycol, a digital communication and media student at Lethbridge Polytechnic who received the Troy Rip internship for her article on student financial education.
In terms of young people not being able to adequately manage their finances because they just don't know or understand basic concepts like savings, budgeting, doing investing, knowing how to manage your debt and credit. So a lot of them get into debt. They probably pay like the minimum amount on their credit card instead of paying it in full and paying it on time, which helps them to build their credit so they can get other credit to get things like a house and things like that, or a car. So I looked at just talking to my classmates and just asking them, do they understand these things? And they're like, no. And then coming as an international student here, I realized that people really don't tell us certain things as well, because you have even your phone plan being tied to your credit score, depending on the type of plan that you get.
Smycol used her experience in finance gained in Jamaica while she was working in the credit, mortgage, and loan management area.
In addition to getting my diploma here at the college, I'm also looking to integrate myself to work with a financial institution in Canada to develop a financial education program. That is something that I'm very passionate about because, as I said, I love helping young people, and I believe the best way to solve the problem of financial illiteracy is to educate people.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Thank you, Heidi. We are heading into Easter weekend, and today is Holy Thursday. In Rome today, Pope Francis kept an important Easter season appointment, visiting inmates at a prison. The pontiff made the trip even though he is continuing to recover from a life-threatening bout of pneumonia. It's a prison Francis has visited before to perform the annual Holy Thursday ritual of washing the feet of 12 people to reenact Christ's humble gesture of washing the feet of his 12 disciples before his crucifixion. Vatican officials say the visit is a clear sign of the importance Francis plays on prison ministry and the need for priests to serve those most on the margins. After a 5-week stay in hospital, his condition is said to be improving and he is slowly returning to normal activities. And back here in Lethbridge, as we celebrate Easter and families gathering this weekend, many people have some special holiday traditions, including certain culinary delights. Well, I visited a local bakery to find out how they make one of those traditional favorites. Take a look. Well, Easter is right around the corner, and that usually means great snacks. We're talking cookies, chocolate, Easter bunnies, and hot cross buns. I'm here at Bootsma Bakery with Nana. Yes,
exciting.
So it is
Thanks,
exciting.
guys, for coming around.
I bet you guys are really super busy these days.
Oh, we are. It's been a crazy morning today. I'm sure people are preparing for the Easter, and we have loads of orders coming in, especially for hot cross buns.
So what makes this recipe so special? Is it a family recipe that's been around over 120 years?
It is. It's actually like tradition goes on, and the name Bootsma has been in existence for a long time. And our boss, who's Steve Bootsma, he's 4th generation. So you know what that means. It's been there for quite a long time. So that's how it makes that recipe very special. You won't get it anywhere, and it takes a long time to prepare. And this is artisan. It means that it's used by the hand with love. Our bakers actually take their time and prepare these out for you. So I'm hoping that you will see how that is done. We use that special, as I said earlier, a special blend of spices, and then only raisins. And then we carefully cross them with Bavarian cream. Carefully done so you get the right lineup.
Well, I can't wait to see this actually happening. So we're going to go talk to Steve, who's actually baking those buns. Okay, so now we've transitioned into the mixing room. I'm joined by Stephen Bootsma of Bootsma Bakery, and you are going to tell me how these delicious hot cross buns are made. I know it's your busy time right now for Easter, so it looks like you have a bunch of bowls right here, so maybe
so
explain.
Here we've got our flour mix right here.
And it's just regular flour?
And this is just regular plain flour.
Okay.
And then we have our yeast already in the bowl. It's a fresh yeast. And then we have our blend of secret spices. And then we have our shortening. And we use a vegetable shortening. And then we have our salt and sugar. And then we have a whey powder. And then we use hot water.
Okay.
And then our eggs, and of course our raisins.
So this is the part where you're gonna roll it into the little bun ball, basically.
Basically.
Okay.
And now we're gonna spread our dough out, and we're gonna put it on our plate. So we'll take it, and then we'll make sure it's centered. And then we're gonna take this guy, and it's got a whole bunch of blades, and it's actually gonna cut the dough into 36 different pieces.
Oh,
so
wow.
right now it did all the cutting. And now it's actually gonna round all the buns for us. And then from here, we put it into a rack and then into the proofer, where it's gonna rise for about 4 hours. The proofer is basically a hot, humid box that helps the dough rise without getting a skin.
And it does that for how long?
4 hours.
Wow. No wonder it takes so long to make one of these little buns.
All right, so these guys are fresh out of the proofer. So they've been sitting in the proofer for about 6 hours. Just waiting for us.
Okay.
And then what
This is
we
a big
do-
process, isn't it?
Oh, it
How
is.
long does it take to make a hot cross bun?
6 to 8 hours.
6 to 8 hours.
Yep.
That's a full shift.
So then what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna put our custard going right across the top.
And this is the Bavarian custard.
It is. So from here, then we put it in the oven for about 20 minutes, and then when they come out, we put a nice thin glaze on it to give it a nice look so that the buns don't dry out as well.
Okay.
And then we pack them and sell them.
All right, so there it is, our finished product, our hot cross bun. Yours looks prettier because I already ripped mine apart, but that's only, what, 8 hours in the making there?
Exactly.
Yeah, all in a day's work. Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Easter.
Exactly.
This is Stephen Bootsma with Bootsma Bakery. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for joining us. Have a happy Easter, everyone. Those were delicious, by the way, and very sticky, too. And speaking of Easter, we have a lovely weekend forecast for it coming up right after this short break. Well, today was the chillier day of the next week with single digits there. Also that little chance of flurries there. But after that, we're looking at beautiful sunshine on a Good Friday, high of 13 degrees. And we're going to get back into the double digits for the next 7 days. Also 20K wind. That is nothing. We can get through that on our Good Friday. Getting into Saturday, we're seeing a high of 18 degrees, back to 13 on Easter Sunday with mainly cloudy skies. Monday, which is Easter Monday, clear skies, high of 14, 12 degrees on Tuesday, and then 15 to round out that 7-day forecast next Wednesday with a mix of sun and clouds. So temperatures looking beautiful. We're staying mostly within that range, but even higher on some of those days. So average high 14 for this time of year, average low 0 for this time of year. 27, record high on this day back in 1923 and also in 1936 it was 27. Back in 53 though, it was minus 12 today, which was the record low for this day. Sun rose this morning at 6:35. Our day is getting longer here. 8:28 is our sunset this evening. So looking at 13 hours, 53 minutes of daylight, getting so close to 14 hours. 7 more minutes to go and we're at the 14-hour mark. Exciting. Beautiful sunshine across most of the west part of the country. So Victoria is sitting at 17 tomorrow, high of 15 in Vancouver. Edmonton also 17, mainly sunny skies, seeing some partly cloudy skies towards the end of the day. High of 16 tomorrow on Good Friday in Calgary with clear skies as well. Lots of sunshine also through the rest of the prairies. Saskatoon 7 though, high of 5 degrees in Regina. Now Winnipeg is the only place it's going to be snowing. We're seeing 60% chance of those flurries, high of only 0 there in Winnipeg. As we get into the central part of the country, we're seeing more of rainfall than snow. So 18 for the high in Toronto. Could see some showers, possibility of some thunderstorms as well. 15 in Ottawa, same thing, showers and thunderstorms. And looking at a chance of showers also in Montreal with a high of 13 degrees. As we look into Atlantic Canada, seeing a lot of sunshine for the most part there as well. 10 degrees for the high in Fredericton, high of 11 in Halifax, 8 in Charlottetown, and a high of also 8 there in St. John's with mainly cloudy skies and 30 to 50 kilometer per hour winds. So there you have it. That is your forecast. The Airline Pilots Association of Canada says WestJet has agreed to stop recruiting pilots through the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. ALPA Canada spoke out against the plan recently, saying the TFW program was never intended to be used that way. While it's pleased with the change of heart, ALPA says WestJet needs to work with pilot representatives and unions to find more practical solutions for attracting and retaining skilled pilots that do not involve utilizing a federal program. The Hudson's Bay Company is hoping to hold a dedicated art auction for the sale of its most historically significant art and artifacts. That includes its royal charter that was granted by King Charles II in 1670, when HBC was incorporated as a fur trading company. The retailer says it wants to hold the auction apart from the broader sale and investment solicitation process that's ongoing. Hudson's Bay filed for court protection from creditors under the company's Creditors Arrangement Act last month and has begun liquidation sales at the majority of its 80 stores. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 86 points on the day to finish at 24,192. The Dow was down 527 points to 39,142. The S&P 500 was up 7 points to 5282, and the Nasdaq was down 20 points to finish at 16,286. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.91 to 64.38 US per barrel. Natural gas was down a cent to 3.24 US. Gold was down 23.74 to 33.2661 US an ounce, and silver was down 31 cents to 32.51 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.84 per bushel. Barley is at $6.86. Canola is at $15.24, and corn is at $8.18 per bushel. Live cattle were up $2.75 to $209.82. Feeder cattle were up $3.40 to $293.45. Lean hogs May contract was up 25 cents to $90.40, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber say they're both facing 2 years in prison after being convicted of mischief. They were found guilty on April 3rd. Barber was also found guilty of counseling others to disobey a court order. While Crown prosecutors haven't commented, Barber posted on Facebook that the Crown has also filed an application to confiscate and auction off his big truck called Big Red, which led the convoy from Saskatchewan to Ottawa in January of 2022. Up next, a lot of folks believe that this particular federal election is perhaps one of the most important ones in Canadian history. You can include our next guest in that group. Faytine Grasiski is the host of the Faytine television program, which airs nationwide, including right here on Miracle Channel and our own partner station, Merit TV Canada. That interview is coming up. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page for more of our stories and interviews.
The federal election will be here before you know it, and there are some key issues that will need wise and godly decisions from our next Prime Minister. Joining us from New Brunswick to chat about this is Faytine Grasiski. She is the host of the Faytine TV program, which airs nationwide, including right here on Miracle Channel and on our partner station, Merit TV Canada. She has also been involved in Canadian politics, running for public office, coming very close to winning the New Brunswick riding of Hampton Fundy St. Martin's in the 2024 provincial election. Faytine, it's great to have you with us.
Oh, it's such a joy to be here. Thank you for taking time for me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, Faytine, a lot of folks believe that this particular federal election is perhaps one of the most important ones in Canadian history. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I think 2021 and 19 were also very, very significant. What we see happening here is, a landscape that is really coming down to about 30 to 50 ridings in each one of our elections, clear divides across our nation on a variety of issues. And these are defining moments. There are parties that have very different visions for the future of our nation. And so how voters mark their ballot will be very consequential.
And voter turnout in federal elections isn't usually super high. And that also seems to be the case when specifically looking at the voter turnout for the Christian community. What's stopping Christians from getting involved, and how can they get more involved?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I have actually seen analytics that have shown that voter participation is actually beginning to surge. As a matter of fact, in advanced polling, there has been, in terms of advanced ballots, maybe in Mark, there's been Very high number of Canadians that have participated. I think as of about a week ago, there was pushing 150,000 ballots that had already been marked. In terms of the faith community, sometimes I think perhaps maybe when it's been easy for a while, not saying that it's been easy the last couple of years, we tend to maybe disengage, let other people take the wheel. But I think that's shifting. I think with the level of economic trauma that many of us have experienced nationally, across the nation, and several of the other issues that Canadians care deeply about, I expect a real surge in engagement, and I think we'll see that reflected on the 28th.
Now, if we want to see revival in Canada, then it makes sense to fight for freedom of speech and freedom of religion. But some of these freedoms are being threatened by potential political legislation. We talked earlier about some budget recommendations, and one of them includes removing charitable status for organizations that want to advance religion.
Yeah, this is very alarming. I think this is rattling a lot of people. Now, to be clear, this isn't at the legislative or didn't reach the legislative stage, but in December of 2024, there was a committee, the Standing Committee on Finance, that adopted over 300 recommendations, and in that bundle was the recommendation for the removal of charitable status for the purpose of the advancement of religion as a charitable objective. So what this means practically is if this recommendation, which was put forward by a Liberal-led committee, was actually adopted into legislation, if this is rolled out in its purest form as recommended, it would mean that churches and Christian ministries all across Canada would not only lose their ability to give a tax receipt, but when an organization loses their charitable status, they have to dissolve their assets as well and give it to a qualified donee. So that would mean organizations like the Miracle Channel would have to sell their building, give it to a qualified donee. If there's any cash in the bank account, maybe you have a contingency fund to pay your staff for the next couple months, that would also have to be given to another qualified donee, which in most situations, this means that staffing is going to be fired and there will be a complete collapse of those charitable operations until that charity can figure out how to continue to function in a monetized way. So it would be a massive hit to the charitable sector across Canada, not only impacting the Christian community, but also the Jewish community. Every religion across our nation would be impacted. So this is a pretty big deal that it was even recommended. And so really this is a time for Canadians, number one, to have this on their radar, but number two, to be speaking with their candidates about it, no matter what party they're from. When they come knocking on your door, ask them, if this actually gets to the floor of the House of Commons, how would you vote on the revocation of charitable status for religious organizations? It would be extremely consequential. And I will just say one other thing on this. There have been extensive studies about this in terms of the social impact of the charitable sector. And a recent study by Cardis under the HALO project showed that for every $1 that's donated to a faith-based charity, there is a $3.49 worth of benefit that is given back to the immediate community that charity functions in. So this would not only be a hit to the faith community, faith communities, but it would also be a hit to communities all across the nation of Canada. So it's a pretty big deal.
That is shocking. Wow. Now, before calling the election, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had proposed changes to the Income Tax Act, like to remove charitable status from not just religious organizations, but also pro-life pregnancy crisis centers. And this looks like this has already passed.
Yeah, so they were right out of the gate with that in 2021. That was actually a part of Justin Trudeau's policy platform at the time, if I'm remembering correctly. And then late last year, Chrystia Freeland and another federal cabinet minister actually made an announcement that they were implementing this. I did recently speak to the head of Pregnancy Care Canada, which basically helps give support to pregnancy care centers all across the nation that are serving women in crisis pregnancy situations. They did tell me that they're not aware yet of a situation where the revocation of charitable status has actually happened. but the press conference was made, and allegedly the rollout is happening. So we'll see, where this all goes, but there does seem to be a real intent in this direction.
Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Canadians witnessed serious government overreach with the enactment of the Emergencies Act, and the many workers and even some children were mandated by the government to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Bodily autonomy should be protected in Canada, should it not?
Oh, I would absolutely agree. And conscience rights, particularly, I know a lot of Canadians felt deeply uncomfortable with taking the vaccine, not because they don't trust vaccines or they're anti-vax, but because it was just so rushed, right? It was such a rushed situation. And we do know that Stats Canada has actually recorded that there have been adverse incidents. And this is a real thing. So I think when there is a risk, there should always be informed consent and the ability to opt out if a Canadian feels uncomfortable with it. And also, I would also say physician conscience rights and nurse practitioner conscience rights. And anybody that's implicated in the process should be able to function with their conscience intact. That would be my strong opinion on that. And thankfully, we do have some members of parliament and provincial legislators as well that agree. And I know, for example, I believe it was in Manitoba a few years back, there was legislation passed when it comes to physician conscious rights on other issues. And so, this is something that Canadians can engage with our leaders with, both on the federal level and the provincial level. And I would encourage them to do so.
Yeah, so are there any parties who would be more inclined to protect the conscience rights of medical professionals?
I have not heard anything explicitly in this current federal campaign, though I do know there are members of parliament that were sitting in the Conservative caucus previously. We'll have to see if they get elected again, like Kelly Block, for example, that put forward a private members bill. She put forward a private members bill, on, if I'm remembering correctly, physician conscience right bill. And so there definitely is a sentiment within the Conservative caucus with some members of parliament, but we'll have to see on the other side who gets elected and what they decide to move forward.
And then MAID, medical assistance in dying, that's an ongoing concern in Canada, with the possibility of our next federal government choosing to allow MAID based solely on the state of an individual's mental health. Are our federal parties moving one way or another on this issue?
This is a very important discussion because when medical assistance in dying was rolled out back around 2016, this was one of the concerns that was raised. And that was, is this going to continue to broaden and broaden? And at that time, Canadians were assured by our elected officials that medical assistance in dying would only be for the terminally ill and those that were expected to die within the foreseeable future, within a short distance in the front, and that there would be protections, that there would be, many safeguards. And, it just seems like the further that we've gotten, the more those safeguards have been stripped away. You can now have medical assistance in dying potentially administered within a 24-hour period. The foreseeable terminal illness clause has now been removed. If somebody is experiencing what is defined as intolerable suffering, even if their death is not imminent, they can request medical assistance in dying. Of course, we've heard horrific stories of medical assistance in dying being offered to those who are disabled, those that are struggling with affordable housing, with our veterans. And so, some of the things that people were signaling as concerns right back then at the beginning have actually rolled out. So in 2027, there's a possibility that this could be broadened even more, as you mentioned, with medical assistance in dying being made available for the mentally vulnerable and possibly for mature minors. And so this is a real concern. And this is something that the international community is watching and actually signaling to the international community, pointing to us saying, hey, don't do what Canada's doing because it has gone too far. And so, when even advocates in the international community are pointing to Canada as the way not to do it, I think that that's something that our elected officials should be paying attention to, and Canadians should be talking to our leaders about.
Absolutely. I mean, gone are the days when everyone looks to Canada and like, oh, what is Canada doing? And it's certainly changed, and I've felt it too. But we know Canada's debt also has grown under the Trudeau Liberals, and for Albertans, the easy answer to generating revenue is build pipelines and get our resources out to market. However, politicians in central Canada have stood in the way and prevented that from happening. Now, there's even major rumblings of Western separation. Your thoughts on this?
Oh, I think it's a very, very real, I guess I'll use the word threat, to the nation. But I also understand it. Canadians from Alberta and Saskatchewan have felt economically abused, disrespected, and disregarded. We see, the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith experiencing mockery. And there's just this tonality of disrespect. I appreciate the strength that Premier Danielle Smith is bringing to the table, though. Of course, she gave that ultimatum on March the 20th to Mark Carney, saying that whoever's elected, these are our list of demands. If these things aren't dealt with within the first 6 months, we are looking at, in her words exactly, we're an unprecedented national unity crisis. As somebody who lives in Eastern Canada, but I'm originally from Alberta, this breaks my heart. I have so much appreciation for the hard workers of our energy sector there in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, and I believe that they deserve respect. And so, I, like many Canadians, are very hopeful that we will get an administration federally that will respect Alberta going forward. Or, I think the predictions are very valid that we could see a move towards, if not separation, at least sovereignty, similar to what Quebec did in 2006. And it's real. It's very real.
So, lastly, what kind of character traits should Canadian voters be looking for in a prime minister?
Well, I think consistency is important. Not that leaders can't evolve or change their mind on an issue if they get more information. But one thing that I've been noticing, at least with Mark Carney, is particularly when it comes to the development of our natural resource sector. He seems to say one thing in BC, another thing in Quebec, one thing in English, another thing in French. And I don't know if it's just because he's trying to find his way or what's going on here. But to me, that causes me to put a question mark. And so I think it's important that leaders say what they mean and mean what they say. Integrity is a thing. And that builds confidence, obviously, in our hearts as the electorate. And this is really one of the things that I'm personally watching for, is where is that integrity factor? Because that's the leader that we can trust.
Faytine Grzeski is the host of the Faytine TV program, which airs right here on Miracle Channel and as well on our sister station, Merit TV Canada. Faytine, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, I've loved the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Well, the Easter weekend is upon us. It certainly has become a very commercialized holiday for a lot of folks. Just a weekend to have some time off, but for Christians who take their faith seriously, it is a holy celebration. And joining us to chat about the meaning of Easter is Pastor Scott Sear. He's with King of Kings Fellowship in Lethbridge. So great to have you with us, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate this.
You bet. Well, looking forward to the conversation. I mean, our culture has changed a lot over the decades, hasn't it? Right? I mean, you think back to when we were kids, right? Times have definitely changed. How much do you think the younger generation actually knows about the meaning of Easter?
Well, it's funny. I remember reading a book recently on the younger generation that we have today, Gen Z, Generation Alpha. And some of the things that we learn is that there is a lower than ever representation of those age groups in churches compared to, say, when we were kids that age. And so common sense would say they don't know near as much as maybe we did when we were younger. Although there is hope, because the book the same book that I read, seems to indicate that there is an openness. There is an open-mindedness and an open-heartedness to things spiritual, to things religious. And so while on one hand, the knowledge of Easter might be low, I think that the opportunity to teach Easter is as good as it's ever been.
I like that. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of interest in it. So, I mean, the Bible says that God made humans in the image of himself, the image of God, right? So what happened? We're not really walking in his image so much, right? So why do we need a savior, and what do we need to be saved from?
That's a big question. I think probably if we were to try to keep it fairly simple, the answer essentially comes down to the fact that over time, we all demonstrate that we have a mistrust in God. You go back to the Garden of Eden, and people talk about what happened there. There was this tree with fruit that Adam and Eve were told not to eat. And at the heart of it, when Eve picked the fruit and gave to her husband, what she essentially did was she said, I no longer trust God when he said, you don't need that. And I think that that put humanity in a position where they were separated from God because of that. And it is that separation that we talk about when we talk about the need for salvation. We need to be saved from an eternal separation from the one who made us. And I hope that, we could certainly talk probably for hours on the subject, but at the heart of it, you have this younger generation you spoke of. What do we want to communicate to them? We want to communicate to them that life is about connection, eternal connection with the one who made you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't view God that way, as someone who wants a real relationship with you and with me. It maybe sounds strange. And again, we talk about sin. I think a lot of people don't really know, what do you mean by sin? What is that, right? Again, something that separates us from God. And I think sin basically comes out of our own self-centeredness, doesn't it? We want to be God. I want to make my own decisions, right? But reality is we are created beings. And I think that's something we need to be saved from, is our own self-centeredness.
Yeah, and I think the challenge, if I could just sort of unpack this idea of self-centeredness out a little bit, it's not always a question of big ego. It's not always a question of being puffed up with pride. Sometimes the self-centeredness is a fear-driven thing. It's one that says, you made me, but I don't trust what you're saying to me because my mind concludes this, that, or some other thing, and so I am now in doubt of what you're telling me, and I turn away. And that is a type of self-centeredness, not necessarily one that is egotistical, but one that is fear-driven. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. Self-centeredness does seem to be at the heart of it.
Yeah, for sure. Starts as just, kids. I mean, it just kind of comes naturally right there. So now, if you ask the average person, okay, so what happens after you die? Are you going to heaven? What's the typical response for that?
Well, it's funny. I was curious about this idea of how many people actually thought they were going to heaven when they died. And it turns out that in North America, the number is somewhere, and they did a survey, an actual survey, and 37% of people are certain that they are going to heaven. That means that all the rest, 63%, aren't so sure, with 23% hoping that they will go to heaven, but have no idea if they will. So that's, it tells me that we have a field of harvest, people who are ripe for these kinds of questions, and this season is perfect for that.
Yeah, well, I think what comes out of that too, I'm not sure, but I've done a lot of good things, I'm a good person, right? That comes up, and So I think we have this, well, I think most religions in the world, if not all, other than Christianity, basically teach something along the lines of that you have to earn your way to heaven by being good enough, doing enough good works, that kind of thing. And I think that's probably the difference, isn't it, between, Jesus. What's the difference there? What did Jesus do for us? How do we get to heaven through Jesus? Well, it's grace, isn't it?
I think on one level, God said, in order for you to work your way to heaven, you have to be holy like I am holy.
Perfect.
And the standard for good works is so high and so unrealistic and so out of our grasp. And Jesus said it doesn't have to be that way. Jesus said, faith in me is eternity with the Father.
Yeah.
Faith in me is eternity with the Father. And I think we make it sometimes so much more complicated than that. All sorts of theological conversations about repentance and baptism and a whole host of other things. At the end of the day, faith in me is eternity with the Father.
So the faith in me, faith in Jesus, essentially comes back to the cross, right? So why did Jesus have to die on the cross? We mentioned that, God is perfect. And so how do we measure up with that? Well, we've broken that standard. We want to have a relationship with the Lord who's perfect, right? Be in heaven with somebody who's perfect. So how does that work? Why did Jesus have to die in our place? I mean, he did live a sinless life, but he's basically the sacrifice for our sins, isn't he?
Yeah. The wages of sin is death, and all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. When you put those two things together, it means just what it says. Death has to be paid. But somebody asked me one day, if somebody died on my behalf for something, that would mean then that there was one person who was given a gift and one person who paid a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so for every person who's lived, is there another person willing to make that sacrifice? Well, God said, I got a better idea. My Son, Jesus Christ, who is God, will die, and he will be raised from the dead. And when he does that, we don't have to have one for one. We now have one for all. All people can experience that salvation through Jesus Christ, that willingness to accept that what he did worked, and all people have a path to eternity with the one who made them.
Well, I appreciate you saying it doesn't need to be complicated. I think of the criminal, it was two criminals crucified with Jesus, and one of them just basically asked the Lord to, he didn't say, the sinner's prayer, as we like to call it, that sort of thing. He's just saying, Lord, remember me, just basically have mercy on me. I know I'm messed up, basically was the message. He's saying to the other criminal, hey, zip it, dude. We both deserve to be here. This guy doesn't. They must have had some, inkling that this guy's different. I mean, there's something divine going on here, and just saying, have mercy on me. And what did Jesus do? He says, yeah, you're going to be with me in paradise today. Wow. What message does that send to people? I mean, it's not that complicated, right?
No, I find that the story of the thief on the cross is the single best way for a person to teach what salvation really is. Here was a person who had an inward change. His heart came to believe something that he previously didn't believe. And everything we read is the outward expression that he has of that change that was inside. He says, Lord, when you enter your kingdom. So he acknowledges Jesus as Lord. He says, when you enter your kingdom, he knows that Jesus is about to die, but that Jesus is the king of a kingdom. That's remarkable that he says that. And then he looks at his fellow thief and he says, we're here because we're getting what we deserve. So you have repentance, you have lordship, and you have confession that you are the king of a kingdom, and you ask him to remember you. So his heart is what saves him, and the outward expression is what we read in Romans 10:9, that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's what that moment is. It's wonderful.
Yeah, very good. You know, so, I mean, he certainly changed my life, and I just want to, you know, let people know that God he's not mad at you. He loves you and me. He loves everybody watching right now, no matter what your circumstance is. He loves you, you know, and he's reaching out to you. You just need to say, hey, you know what? I'm here. Help me. And he will, just like the thief on the cross. He's going to answer those prayers that are genuinely crying out for help in their lives. Any quick thoughts here on how people, you know, at home can maybe just celebrate Jesus without getting into the whole commercialization thing, you know, the Easter weekend?
One of the things that seems clear is that there are so many questions that people have about Jesus, the resurrection, Easter, and these sorts of things. And one of the things that people avoid, I'm told, even from people in my church, are family conversations on the subject, because they don't want to get into a fight, or they don't want to have religion, you know, jammed down their throat, or the rest of that sort of thing. But it's my heart, first of all, obviously, the number one thing that families can do during the Easter weekend in order to explore this thing called the resurrection is to attend a service. Absolutely, make no mistake. Attending a service is the number one way to sort of bring these things that we talk about to the forefront, out of the recesses of our memory. And then I think the second thing is to encourage people to say, revisit that conversation with your family. Be open about it. Let people tell their own side. If they have something that they want to say about Christianity or about resurrection or about Jesus, and it might not be so particularly popular, or it might not be so particularly true, whatever. Let people have the conversation. Make conversation about these things safe in families. And I think then the fighting can stop, because then everyone's opinion during the season matters. It's better to have the conversation than not.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, it's definitely worth talking about. And put a quick plug in for your Easter services. King of Kings Fellowship, you're on, what, 6th Avenue here in Lethbridge. What time does that start?
Yeah, King of Kings Fellowship this Sunday, 10 a.m. We will be having our service, and there's nothing wild and woolly going on, but we are going to do it a little differently this particular Sunday. There'll be a little more music, a little more what I would call maximum participation. Okay. People taking the stage to sort of read scripture and share their heart and give testimony. And my message will be shorter, if that's an encouragement to anybody.
That's worth coming down
but
for.
Yeah, it's at 10 a.m., 539 18th Street South. Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, anyone is welcome to attend. You don't have to be a Christian. Anybody can pop in. So thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Scott Sear, again, the pastor of King of Kings Fellowship in Lethbridge, kingofkingsfellowship.com. And on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.